Welcome back, fellow internet adventurers. Prepare for another wild ride through Reddit's strangest stories. We're diving deep into the internet's quirkiest corners. Grab your popcorn and join us on this adventure. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Let's get started. My son Matt turned 13, and I began to suspect my wife, Julia, of cheating. One day, I picked up some photos from the pharmacy on my way home from work. Since Julia wasn't home yet, I sat down and looked through them. It was a beautiful day when Matt came home to find his friends at a surprise party. He was genuinely surprised. While going through the pictures, I found a great one of Matt and my friend Steve. It was a close-up of their faces. Steve has been my best friend for life. His kids call me Uncle John, and mine call him Uncle Steve. We are very close. Something caught my attention when I compared the images of their faces side by side. They had the same color hair, black, and the same eye color, green. They shared a similar narrow nose, and their skin tones and facial features were alike. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn they were father and son. A few other pictures were of kids at the party, but something in the background caught my eye. There was Julia and Steve in what I would describe as a very intimate position. In fact, it looked like they were about to kiss or had just kissed. I scrutinized the other photos for anything else where they were together but couldn't find anything. I took the two pictures out of the bag and put them in a desk drawer in my home office. The fact that my son looked like Steve and that I had a picture of Steve and Julia in an intimate pose didn't prove anything. However, I immediately wondered if I could recall any other signs that Julia might have been unfaithful to me. I didn't have much time to think because a few minutes later, Julia walked through the front door, kissed me, and headed upstairs to change. It was something she did every day after work, and I had never had any reason to suspect her before. With suspicion in my mind, I followed her upstairs to see if I could catch her doing anything. When I entered the bedroom, Julia was surprised to see me but didn't seem bothered by my presence. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" Julia asked as she changed into her house clothes. "Not too bad. I picked up the pictures from Matt's party on the way, and they turned out great. But didn't we take too many of them? 5 reels of film for a birthday party?" I asked. After all the trouble we went through to make him think he wasn't having a party, only to throw him a surprise party like this one, I wanted to make sure Dan had enough pictures to remember it by. "It was nice to bring Steve, Mary, and their children, as well as all of his friends and family, to the celebration," Julia replied. When Steve's name was mentioned, did she recoil? There was movement, but did it come from within, or was it in response to the name being said? "Yes," Julia agreed. "The party was fantastic. I got nothing else from her, save maybe a slight flinch. I decided I would keep an eye on her and Steve as much as possible to see if they were up to anything. I didn't use all the high-tech tracking devices, audio recording, video cameras, and phone tapping, at least not right away. But I started tracking if Julia said where she was going to be. I would then find reasons to call and see if she was there or not. A few weeks later, the body of a missing little girl was found in the lake. As luck would have it, her family had DNA testing done beforehand so that she could be identified in case anything happened. Julia gave me the perfect opportunity to find out what was bothering me. "John, I think we should do these DNA cards for the children too. If something ever happens and a body or body part is found, I'd want to know if it's our child or not," Julia said. "You're absolutely right. This girl was missing teeth, and the body was pretty badly damaged, so normal methods didn't work. I think having the children's DNA on file is a wise decision," I said. I stated I would take our 4 children, Matt, Ashley, Hannah, and Sarah, to get tested and put their records on file with the county. Once we were at the family doctor's office, I made the request. "So, John, what's going on?" Dr. Smith asked. "I'd like copies of the tests. It's not that I don't trust the county to keep the information safe, but I feel better having copies in my home safe, I said. Sure, John, no problem. Many parents make the same request, Dr. Smith replied. 2 weeks later, I went out of town for a week on business. While there, I visited a doctor's office for DNA tests to check myself out. A woman I lived with for 8 years claims I am the father of her 4 children and is now demanding child support from me. I have reason to believe that I am not the father of one or more of them. I have demanded DNA records of the children from her. Now, I am asking you to tell me how many of them I should be financially responsible for. It's always sad when someone claims a child is yours when it's not. I've seen several marriages destroyed because of this, the doctor said. Are you implying that you and this woman are not married? The physician inquired. No, dear. We parted ways 3 years prior. I'm not married to this person, and I'm really annoyed by all of this, I replied. Before I went home, I had the envelope containing the findings. They had not yet been viewed, and the nearer the results approached, the less certain I was that I wanted to know everything. When I got home Friday night, there was a note on the table from Julia saying that she and the kids had gone to her mom's for the weekend. Unable to endure an entire weekend to figure out what to do if things were as bad as I feared, I decided to open the envelope. Only after calming my nerves with a glass of scotch did I see the results, prompting me to pour another and drink it quickly. None of my 4 children were actually mine, but it was clear they had the same father. After a good drink, I had fallen asleep around 4 in the morning. When I woke up, I started thinking about what I should do. I suspected that Steve was the father of my children, but I needed certainty at this point. I decided to go high-tech. There's a store not far from my house that specializes in surveillance equipment, so on Saturday morning, I went there and bought the whole kit. I installed tiny motion-activated cameras covering every room in the house, along with sound recorders. I also had tracking devices to put in Julia's car and Steve's SUV, ensuring I would always know where they both were. I set it all up so that the information was dumped to a computer in the basement, which I could access from my laptop anywhere. I installed the tracking device on Steve's SUV on Saturday afternoon when he came by and took me with him since I had called to say that Julia would be out of town all weekend. I knew for a fact that he wouldn't be spending this weekend with her. Searching through Julia's belongings for anything that might lead to her disappearance took up most of Sunday morning. I didn't know she kept a journal, and her computer appeared to be in good condition. Another piece of circumstantial evidence was the sexy lingerie I had never seen before, hidden away in the back of her wardrobe. When Julia came home with the kids on Sunday night, I greeted them all with a big hug. That night in bed, Julia just blew me away. "John, you don't worry too much, but I think I'm pregnant," she said. "Pregnant?" I asked her. "Yeah, I think so. I'll go to the doctor tomorrow to see what he says, but I have a feeling," Julia confirmed. At this point, I decided I was going to go to the doctor to get a fertility test too. Julia and I had tried for a long time to have a baby before she got pregnant with Matt. I took time off work to be with her as much as possible. It was the same with all the kids. I know it's not easy to get pregnant. We went through all that for the first 4 kids, and now she got pregnant without even trying. That seems suspicious to me. I drove to a neighboring town on Monday and went to a clinic where no one knew me. I took the test and waited. My sperm count was above average. This was just another fact to add to the pile. I had a high sperm count, yet my wife and I had tried many times to get pregnant, and it was Steve who impregnated her. I rushed back to work and accessed the information that had been gathered up to that point. The tracking devices showed that Steve left for work and then drove to a hotel on the east side of town. Julia's car spent part of the time at the doctor's office and then went to the same hotel. I had seen enough, so I went back to work. That night, Julia was so excited that she was pregnant, that we were blessed with another child. I was holding back as hard as I could from spilling all the information I had and incriminating her. Over the next few weeks, I gathered even more information and decided that they had formed a pretty good routine. They met for a long lunch at the hotel on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They always had the same room booked. I took pictures of them going in and out of it, and there was no need to see what was going on inside. This was because, on Tuesday and Thursday, they would meet at our house and get intimate in our guest bedroom. The more I saw, the harder it was for me to keep from slamming the door. Finally, after watching them for 2 months, I recorded a phone conversation that drove me crazy. "Hey, are you comfortable talking?" Steve asked. "Yeah, John's playing golf, and the kids are at their friends' houses," Julia replied. "I've been worried about John lately. He's been strange. Do you think he could have found out everything?" Steve asked. "He hasn't figured out anything in 16 years. Why would he figure it out now?" Julia asked. "As for Matt, he's becoming more and more like me every day," said Steve. "So, what? John thinks I'm the perfect wife. He'll never suspect I'm cheating on him, and he'll never believe that for the past 15 years, I've been making sure I only have children with you and not him," Julia said. "I'm still not sure I approve of that," Steve replied. "Take it back now, or you'll never touch me again," Julia said. "Okay, I take it back. I can't wait until Monday, baby. I can't. On Monday, I have a lunch meeting. It's a really big deal, so Tuesday, we're just going to need a really long lunch," Julia said. "Okay, what time should I be there?" Steve clarified. "Around 11. I'll see you then," Steve concluded the conversation. I listened to this conversation on Sunday. On Monday, I took enough information with me to start divorce proceedings based on adultery and went to see an attorney. "So, John, what grounds for divorce do you choose?" Dave asked. "Marital infidelity," I replied. "Are you sure?" "That's actually hard to prove in our state," said Dave. "Well, maybe you can tell me if there's enough to prove it." "Pictures of my wife and her lover in the process of intercourse. I also have video. In fact, even some phone conversations were recorded, including one where my wife admits that she deliberately took steps to have children with her lover instead of me. And last but not least, DNA tests show that none of the 4 children I am raising are mine." "Is that enough?" I asked. "Yes, that should be more than enough. I'll send your wife the divorce papers right away," Dave replied. "Can I choose when and where she gets the papers?" I inquired. "What do you mean?" Dave asked. "Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, she's supposed to meet her lover at our house. Can we arrange for her to get them at home, say at 11:30 or 11:45? Handing over the papers at the time she commits adultery would be damning evidence," I said. "Yes, that's an acceptable idea. Would it be illegal to invite my wife's parents, sisters, a few of her friends, her lover's wife, and perhaps their bosses?" I inquired. "You seem hungry for a little payback. I can tell. Telling them it's a surprise party to celebrate the new baby would help. It should be all right because they are unaware of what they will see beforehand," Dave said. "Fantastic," I said to myself. I called a few people after leaving the attorney's office, inviting everyone to the surprise party in honor of Julia, with the exception of Mary. Mary, of course, would tell Steve, and then he would know something was up. At 10:45 Tuesday morning, I called Mary and asked her to meet me at our house for a little chat. I made everyone wait quietly in the yard until the party was all gathered. I said Julia was resting inside, so we would sneak up and surprise her. Dave was also there with the divorce papers. We sneaked into the house unnoticed and headed for the guest bedroom. I swung the door open, and we all yelled, "Surprise!" There were many surprised faces both in the room and in the hallway. Mary immediately yelled at Steve, and Julia's family started yelling at her. Julia began yelling at me. Steve tried to gather his clothes and jump out of the house, but his boss blocked the door and notified him afterward. Amidst all this chaos, Dave calmly walked over to Julia, who was sitting on the bed under a sheet and sobbing uncontrollably. "Julia Davis, you are hereby served with these divorce papers filed by your husband, John Davis. He is seeking a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Mr. Davis is not seeking any form of custody of the 4 children already born or the child in your womb. DNA testing has shown that Mr. Davis is not the biological father of any of the children. In a recorded phone conversation between you and Steve Wilson, you state that you intentionally prevented the children from being with Mr. Davis so that you could become pregnant by your lover. Mr. Davis is claiming 90% of the entire estate. A court date will be scheduled for this case unless you agree to these terms," Dave said. He spoke loudly and calmly, almost like a robot. He handed the papers to Julia and left. Both Julia and Steve lost their jobs. Steve divorced Mary, and Julia's family, who used to like me, disowned her. In the divorce, I didn't get 90%, I settled for 75%. However, in another lawsuit, I received compensation from Steve for preventing me from having children. I love Julia with all my heart. If I had acted quickly and made a claim against her from the first moment of suspicion, it surely would have broken my heart. Now, however, knowing the depth of her infidelity and treachery, it was easier for me to cut her out of my life. I still see her around town from time to time, and each time she tries to apologize to me, but I don't want to hear it. She cheated on me for years. She deliberately kept me from having a child so she could have Steve's baby and then made me believe I was the father. I would like for her to be dead if it weren't for my intense affection for her, but I'll always remember the wonderful days, no matter how badly she treated me. When the kids discovered that Uncle Steve was actually their father and that the cousins were actually their half-siblings, they were perplexed. I'm sad this happened to them. They all had to spend a lot of time in counseling because of this, but this was just another way Julia hurt them. Now she has to live with them hating her for choosing Steve's kids over mine. When they see me, they still call me Daddy.